Hello and welcome to a special Ask Me Anything About Forgotten Realms episode. I'm your guide, Graham, and this is Lore Diver, the podcast about lore, world building, and alternative takes. So, what's going on here tonight? Well, tonight is going to be an interesting evening because, as I said 2 weeks ago, I was on vacation and nothing was happening, and I didn't have a chance to prepare everything for tonight, and that if tonight was going to happen, it was going to be an Ask Me Anything sort of event. So that's what's going on. This is an Ask Me Anything. So I've got my chat stream fired up here, ready to take people's questions, and yeah, ask me anything about the Forgotten Realms, because that's what it's all about tonight. I've got this, you can't see it, but just off screen here, I've got this lovely map. Oh, here we go. First question, quantum mechanic. So, the Spell Plague, what exactly was it? The Spell Plague was another in a series of disasters related to magic in the Forgotten Realms not working anymore. In this particular case, if memory serves correctly, which it may or may not, Cyric, or Cyric, depending on how you want to pronounce it, a god of murder, evil, and insanity, finally succeeded in killing Mystra, a goal of his for reasons that aren't really worth going into. Just a lot of bad writing. Anyways, he hated her, he killed her, or at least thought that he did, and it threw the whole weave out of whack, because Mystra, like Mistral before her and the Mystra before her, are actually embodiments of the weave in many ways. So when she went, everything went sideways, and all kinds of badness was unleashed onto the planet. And the Spell Plague was the most obvious aspect of it. It was the pivotal event in 4th edition, and it really got weird because it introduced ideas like spell scars and stuff. So basically, it was, if you were exposed to an area that had heavy Spell Plague saturation, or in fact your character could get a spell scar, which essentially gave them a spell that could cast permanently. It was really weird, kind of an interesting mechanic they were trying to explore, I think. And ultimately the Spell Plague finally ended with Mystra coming back. And when she came back, what happened was all of her I can't remember what they're called. It's like the Seven Sisters. Basically, all of her earthly minions got together. Hellbent Blackstaff died, and died as part of it, and a whole bunch of stuff. And they, using their magical force, they brought her back to life. She reestablished control over the weave, and life carried on. Yeah, so that was the Spell Plague, as much as I can remember of it right now. It was a weird idea. It was deeply tied into the almost sort of post-apocalyptic, like immediately post-apocalyptic destruction in the realms that was happening in 4th edition. And yeah, just odd. So comment here. So it is a 4th edition invention. That would explain a lot. Yeah, it was tied in with the whole Sundering event, or not Sundering. Spell Plague happened. Then you had the Abir and Toril got mashed back together, or swapped parts, and yeah, it's a whole lot of 4th edition stuff. Insofar as I understand right now, the Spell Plague is over completely. There are no spell-scarred lands left. Even most of the pits and stuff that opened up have been filled in. So, yeah, Spell Plague. Good times. Alright, let's see here. Just looking at the map right now and just, man, whole lot of stuff went down in that edition. It was really weird. Alright, so do we have another question? There's 3 people watching. Oh, here we go. What are my thoughts on the island of Lantan? Lantan. So Lantan is off the north coast of Chult, and it is an anomaly. In my opinion, it is a Gond the Wonderbringer is basically in charge. Like his people run the place. It's occupied by humans and gnomes, and the humans that are there are like super pasty white redheads, which I can only imagine makes their life a non-stop living hell, because they're, you know, in the same sort of region as they're in the same latitudes as Kalimshan and Chult, which are not conductive to having that complexion and not being lobster red all the time. But as far as the islands themselves, I don't have a huge opinion on them, because I haven't read a ton of. I don't think there's a lot written about them, because they were just such an odd thing on the world. I mean, they had technology, steam engines, and all that sort of thing. I was reading recently, actually, I was reading about them for something else, and they were trying to build a mechanical gate. So basically like a teleportation system that was mechanically powered instead of mystically powered. And into 5th edition now, Lantern is actually kind of dangerous. They have submersibles and higher technology, so there's sort of a little bit of a Captain Nemo vibe going on with them right now. I think that there's a lot of cool potential in Lantern if they decide to exploit it and develop it further. However, in doing so, I think that they're going to have to take a lot of time and patience in the planning process for it, because anything that comes out of there is going to like profoundly change the Forgotten Realms. Like much more so than like the previous stuff out of there was like smoke powder and stuff like that. And introducing black powder, the, you know, Forgotten Realms equivalent of black powder, into the game didn't switch things up too much. Introducing non-magical submersibles and non-magical, basically steampunk technologies is a radical game changer. It would change the entire power dynamic of the Sword Coast and the western half of Ferran, and immediately turn them into a either a target for destruction or a power broker that sells technology. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can happen going on there with Lantern. Let's see here. Comment: Captain Nemo is exactly what I was hoping to say. Yeah, that was what I immediately got reading the Skag book there. Hey, if I had my choice, where would I set the next lore splat book and why? I would place the next lore / splat book, if I had my way, I would put it into the Alamber Sea area, the Old Kingdoms region. A lot of stuff happened there in 4th edition that is persistent. It has gone into 5th edition, and it really needs to be covered in deeper depth than the treatment that's been given to it so far. For example, Hyamiskar fell because of internal treachery, which was just... reading that storyline made my brain hurt. It was just so dumb. And anyways, Hyamiskar fell, but it didn't go away. It's still there. Like there's still an Imiskar on the surface that nothing's really being covered about. Mulhorand has changed radically. All of its little daughter states that split off are all doing their own thing. There's the Beastlands, Okoth. Chisenta is doing its own thing, having some sort of like civil war right now. And then there's a massive conflict happening between Unther and Time Anther, with Time Anther being the Dragonborn nation that remained on Toriel after the planets were separated again. And Unther, which is full of like demon worshippers, and like they cut deals with Lords of the Abyss to like take back their lands. So there's a lot of wild stuff happening there, and it really needs to be covered. Quite a bit. So yeah, that's where I would place the next lore / splat book. It's an area that's been poorly used and developed in the past, and has so much stuff happening in it right now that it needs that sort of attention. All right, next question here. What do I know about the Taurani? I've always liked the bits I have read, and it's been super sparse. Follow-up. What would you like to see done with the Taurani? Okay, the Taurani are super interesting. Their treatment in previous editions was a lot like the Chultans. It was sort of hit and miss. So they actually used to have they used to be the dominant population through the Old Kingdoms. They were from where modern Chasenta is and the Akinal region, all the way down to the Alamber Sea, headed east, and then over into where modern Malhorand is now. There's no description of them in the past. However, you can sort of read between the lines, especially if you read the older materials from first edition for that area and second edition, where it talks about the Taurani occupying positions of power in Malhorand, which was reversed later because they decided that the Milan needed to be like giant racists. But when they were first presented, the Taurani were engineers, high priests, and a whole bunch of other stuff in Malhorand, in addition to being in Termish. And so the fact that they weren't enslaved like everybody else and they were a cog in that society indicates that something happened in the distant past that let them stay that way. However, that was undone later on, and they sort of put them into a state where they were in more or less constant conflict with the Mulan people, so Unther and Malhorand and all that sort of thing. And it was, and like by constant conflict, I mean were chased out of modern Malhorand, then lost all of their lands where modern Unther and Tymanther are, and were ultimately pushed back into the Akinal region, which is the last traditional land that you still find the Taurani in. The rest of them all went up and went to the Jamdath Psyocracy, which is pretty awesome, because it brings Jamdath into things. The wave of refugees that showed up in Jamdath were more than the Jamdathans really wanted to deal with. And the Jamdathan sword cities were all along what is now the Vilhan Reach. So they sent them north into an area called Granite Gates, or Granite Grates, I think it was called. That's where modern Termish is. They didn't have anything there, basically, and it was just a convenient place to put all these refugees and leave them to do their own thing, which is exactly what happened. Then after the Jamdath Theocracy was destroyed, what would become Termish developed from there. Aside from that, their development is really weird. They are coded visually as being black, but the names that they're given are more Italian sounding, which is an odd choice. They are described as they're another mercantile society, because that seems to be the default if for when TSR was putting together the realms or was modifying them. Everything in its dog. If they were like, we don't want a kingdom here, let's just make it another merchant prince operation and call it a day. That happened to them. And there was a lot of weirdness around like the description of how they like made their armor and stuff. It's like, they were inspired by elven ruins or something like that. So they put like little like spirally towery sorts of things on their armor, which didn't make any sense. Like it was just but yeah, they have there's a lot of stuff you can surmise about the Taurani, but in order to do so, you need to go through like 3 editions worth of books, and It's what's it? The Old Kingdoms. What other books were there? The Grand History of the Realms, of course, and there was a couple of the Shining Sea books as well, the Vilhan Reach, and those all sort of cover the Taurani's history, and you really have to patch it all together. It's cool, but it's, you know, much like the you know, where I was talking about, you know, where the next lore splat book be and why. It's one of those things where it's never been developed really well, and it sort of deserves more attention. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question, or at least gave you something to think about. There we go. Are the Drow evil? Canonically, yes. Yeah. Are the Drought Evil? Personally, I don't really think so. I think that they're probably, like, they may have evil inclinations simply because of the dominant parts of their society, but the way that evil is described as functioning in D&D doesn't really lend itself well to stable civilizations or cultures. Especially if it's chaotic evil, which is how the Drow are described. I think that in a better design, the Drow would probably be lawful neutral, simply because they follow the law, no matter how horrible the law is, and that makes more sense with how Lolth runs things. Like, her rulers make evil laws, and the Drow simply follow them because it's the law, and if you don't follow the law, you get in trouble. So that would be my approach to that. Yeah, personally, I think that it's kind of silly. It's that whole essentialism issue that you run into with D&D, and it's would not. Like, are they evil? Yeah, canonically they are, but if you wanted to make something more nuanced for your own game, I would have their ruling classes, the people who are making the laws and enforcing the laws, they would be the lawful evil and chaotic evil sort of operations, and I would make the ruck and file of Drow civilization into lawful neutral. It would also help ease a lot of the transitions, because Drow remain fairly popular as player characters, and so if you have them coming from a lawful neutral background instead of chaotic evil background, it would ease the transition into surface life and interacting with other cultures, simply because, you know, they're lawful neutral, so they're going to follow the law as presented. So yeah. Had a comment here, terrified neutral. Exactly. Let's see here. Question, save your best material for yourself, but I'd love to hear what kind of story you do given the chance to write for D&D. Like stories in like a novel, or like shorts, like literature, or like narrative for an adventure sort of thing. Because it sort of goes in a few different directions in my brain. Like an adventure book. Oh, okay. Oh, man. I would plumb deeply into... Because I'm a giant archaeology nerd in real life. I would plumb deeply into the deep history of the Forgotten Realms and tie the adventure into things that aren't normally used in games. For example, if I was doing something in the northern part of Ferran, I would tie it into Astoria, the giant kingdom that was there. I think that the fact there was a kingdom of giants is amazing. I think the fact that they fought a war against dragons that eventually, you know, was a Pyrrhic victory for the dragons is also awesome, and the whole place should be covered in amazing giant ruins. And there's even like a ton of people with giant blood and stuff up in that area. So I would want to tie it into that and have them trying to do something about their situation. Pardon me. Likewise, I would, if I was operating, like, say, down in, like, sorry, I realize I'm looking off the screen here. You guys can see I'm looking at the map beside me, and it's gauging off of it. I would love to do something crazy in the Plains of Purple Dust. The place is packed full of the ruins of the original Imiskar Empire, and they were creating gates and summoning monsters and demons, the likes of which modern sages and magic users in the realms can't even imagine. And the things that would be there would be amazing. I'd love to do something around the Jamdath Psiocracy. I think that it's cool. There was a whole psionic empire for a while, and well, what happened to them? Are there some left? Are they in secret cities? What's happening? What happens if there's something that there's only they can really deal with, and you need to find them somehow? But yeah, that's what I would do. The adventure that I would write, or adventures that I would write, would leverage all of this history that just sort of sits by the wayside. Stuff about the Sirach, like I talked about in a Lord Iver episode a little while back. They're coming back. They're an ancient threat that, like, the only people left on the planet that even sort of understand how powerful they are Aboleths. Like, nobody else has made it into the future to be able to warn people about what's going on. And so, yeah, I would want to tie it into that. I would want to give it a nice breadth of travel, like have it happen in multiple locations, so that the players have a chance to see more of the realms and experience more of it. And I think it would, there would be multiple endings for it, and I would try to present, I wouldn't want to have it as a catastrophic event, because I think that happens too often. But I think it would be the sort of serious level of, like, threat, danger, all that sort of stuff. Just enough to draw the players in, but not enough that it should be attracting, like, the powers of the world. So, yeah, I think that's what I would do. I've had luck in the past, just in my own adventures and stuff like that, for friends doing things like that. And, they've sort of gotten used to dealing with ruins and stuff like that. What levels would this adventure be for? I would go probably along the lines of the Tomb of Annihilation book and say levels 1 to 12 or so, something like that. It'd be something that you could enter into, multiple points to enter into it, depending on the level of the character. So if you already have pre-existing characters who are a few levels higher, that's fine. If you make new characters up at level 1 and you want to go into it, that'd be fine as well. So have multiple points of entry coming into it, and then have it go up to about level 12, because I've found at least that after level 12 things get really ridiculous. Like, the way that the challenge ratings and everything else scales as you approach level 20, it gets really difficult on a world building level to justify nobody else noticing that this is happening, especially in a world like Forgotten Realms, where you have Elminster and which the surviving Seven Sisters, and characters like that floating around who would take an interest in that sort of thing. So yeah, I think like levels 1 to 12 would be the optimum area that I would want that adventure to be in. waiting for the next question here. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, more stuff needs to happen in the Plains of Purple Dust. Sorry, I just looked over the map again, just thinking about the last question. I'm like, yeah, there's space for more things. So, question: do I use minis when I play, or Theater of the Mind? I am, if it's in person, very much Theater of the Mind. Those instances where my friends and I are actually able to get together and play some D&D. We are all about theater of the mind. A big part of that comes from the simple fact that we were never huge into D&D when we were starting the game. It was a game that we had. It was a game that we played once in a while, but it wasn't our main game. We were playing a lot of Palladium and other stuff, so theater of the mind was the norm for us, and that's where we like to stay. Pardon me. Unless there's reasons to not do theater of the mind. For example, when we're playing the Street Fighter role-playing game, yeah, we have the hex grids out and stuff like that because we have to have them for that. However, online games, which is something that we've been getting into in Roll20 and stuff like that, very much using little icon packs and stuff like that, just because it makes things easier. At least in that instance, and as a result, I've had a lot of fun creating maps and stuff like that, using some pretty cool pixelated art to give it sort of this video game vibe. But yeah. So next question: what would I consider to be a well done horse culture, and does one exist in the Forgotten Realms as is? There are no good horse cultures on the Forgotten Realms that I am aware of. The only horse culture per se in it that I'm aware of that was described in any sort of major way as being a horse culture was the Mongol analog, which was the Horde, and it was not done very well. It suffered from a lot of the same problems Mazda and Chult suffered from in 2nd edition. So I would say there isn't one right now. If I was going to look to create a horse culture, quite honestly, I would place it. I know I'm looking at the map again. Sorry. I would place it into the Eastern Shar, or the Endless Waste, like the Horde land, the lead up area to the Horde lands, simply because those are the sorts of wide open areas that are great for developing that sort of equestrian background and culture, where they're more than simply transport. It's a full on way of life. And yeah, I would do. I would build something from scratch if I were, if you're looking for a horse culture in Forgotten Realms. Build it from scratch. Do some research on cavalry tactics and horse cultures and stuff like that, and sort of build something and try to avoid. And I would try to avoid patterning it exactly off of anything in the real world, because that just gets ugly. Let's see here. Next question is: where on Toril would I say a low-level party could have the greatest impact? Look at the map again. Low-level party having the greatest impact. Right now, a low-level party having the most impact would be in the Shining South area, I think. The Sword Coast, the North, the Heartlands, the Old Kingdoms, all those areas are places where low-level adventurers can do things, but they're not going to make a huge scratch. The areas are highly developed. The threats in them are fairly high level. and there's no, and there's there's no competition. There's lots of competition from other groups doing the same sort of thing, and the challenge ratings are much, much higher. Down the Shining South, so like Lurien, which is no longer flooded, Var the Golden, Durpar, places like that, Dambrath. Those are areas where I think that low-level parties could have a very significant impact. Largely because A, they're underdeveloped, so there's some leeway for DMs to sort of get creative. B, the information that is in them or is available about them makes them low-level friendly areas where you can really sort of like get into things, get involved with things on a local level or even a regional level, and have a lasting impact. Simply because there's, aside from like as you get closer to Helrua, things get sketchy because then you're starting to run into where like the Serac are operating. But outside of that, like it's a fairly chill area, but there's a lot of things going on. Like Durpar, for example, in 4th edition, had some like evil crystal mining thing happening, and like hobgoblins patrolling the streets and stuff like that. So like these are the sorts of things for like low to mid-level adventurers where they can go in, make a big difference, and have it actually stick. Whereas like Sword Coast and other areas, yeah, you can be low to mid-level adventurers, but you're low to mid-level adventurers amongst throngs of other low to mid-level adventurers. So yeah, I would definitely go with the Shining South for that. And actually, I would even push north. And yeah, you know what? Correction, up into the Old Kingdoms area as well. Because there's a lot of stuff. The area is quite balkanized, and yeah, that's a situation where you can get in and do stuff. Let's see here. Next question. What is the deal with the Harpers? Who runs them? And what exactly do they want for Ferran? Okay, the Harpers are an ancient organization. I think they've been wiped out a couple of times and reformed a few times. Basically, they're do-gooder busybodies, for lack of a better description. They want to do good and oppose evil. And to a lesser degree, tyranny and all that sort of stuff. Nobody really runs them. They are a very loose collective. So there's no like, I can't remember ever reading anything about there being like head harpers or like high level harpers or stuff like that. But there seems to be like a very, very loose governance and very loose direction. Harper agents will occasionally be dispatched on missions to go find things out or sort things out. And what do they want for Ferran? You know what? Your guess is as good as mine. The Harper series of books, which are near and dear to my heart, and I strongly recommend, like if you want to get a really good feel for what the Forgotten Realms can offer, read those books. They're really good. Well, not really good. They're good light fantasy novels to read, and they cover a lot of material and really give a really good feel and vibe for what the place is like. But there's no rhyme or reason to what the Harpers are actually doing. In some things, they're investigating the murders of high-level like nobles and stuff like that. In others, they are protecting things, trying to, find, capture back old scrolls or old magic, hide things, find things, all that sort of stuff. Basically, they just sort of want to make sure the place runs in an orderly fashion, sort of. However, there's been some really big falling down points about them. For example, they're absolutely opposed to Zental Keep and the Zentarum, but they're also okay with Am functionally enslaving Maztica, and with like continued slavery, and with like slave raids from Kalimshan and other places hitting Chult and the peninsula. So pretty much anyone can get a Harper pin. You just have to find a Harper, hang out with them for a while, be a good guy, and yeah, you get your pin in a mission that you might die on. So yeah, that's the Harpers. It's a real shame because there's like some really cool potential with them, but here we are. What cool potential do I see with the Harpers? The Harpers have potential to be a balancing force against a lot of the other actually organized groups in the Forgotten Realms. Because one of the things that people sort of assume, like in very, very broad terms assume, is that of the groups presented, only the Zhentarim are really bad, because they're traditional bad guys in the Forgotten Realms. However, the Lord's Alliance, they're all about order and maintaining the status quo, which isn't always a good thing. The Emerald Enclave is good if you like wilderness and druids, but have also engaged in what could very easily be described as war crimes in areas as object lessons to groups of completely uninvolved people as to why they shouldn't maybe cut as many logs as they're cutting. That happened like a lot in Termish, like a lot. The Emerald Enclave are villains there, like straight up villains. And yeah, so like you have all these groups, you have all these disparate goals. Not all of them are good. Not all of them result in good finishes. And so the potential that I see with the Harpers is they could act as that balance. They're there for the overall good of the place. They're there to support the overall concept of good in the Forgotten Realms, and that should put them at times in opposition against the Lord's Alliance, the Emerald Enclave, the Zhentarim, because the Zhentarim. It should also place them sometimes supporting these groups if what they're doing is improving things and making things better. And I think that by giving them the same level of organization as these other groups have would do that, and it would make them a much more attractive option to have in game, and certainly make them more interesting and useful. Because they would actually be a major player as opposed to just sort of like, oh yeah, go meet the local Harper agent, and they don't really know much about the area. Like, I think that's what happened in Tomb of Annihilation there. Like, the Harper agent was not useful at all. But yeah, so yeah, I'd see them as very much a political moderator, sort of sometimes doing good things, sometimes doing things that other groups perceive as bad because they improve or they go against their goals but make other people's lives better. Plus, it would give like characters like Erlen Moonblade a whole new scope of character development. And if you don't know who she is, Erlen Moonblade is one of my favorite Harper's characters, and she was an assassin, or at least like that was her reputation. They called her an assassin, even though she constantly denied that she was. Until she killed an assassin from Kalimshan, and under their rules, if you kill one of their assassins, you inherit that assassin's rank. And I guess he was like a Shadow Sash or something like that. He's one of the higher ranked ones, and so that actually made her officially an assassin. And within this context, she may actually be one who simply, isn't killing people for evil, but is instead this lord is, destroying his lands. He's doing all this evil stuff. He's got to go. We're not going to spend, a ton of lives sieging a castle. So let's send in an agent. She'll finish him off and get out of there, and no problem. So yeah, that's the sort of potential that I see with the Harpers. If they were to be developed in a few different directions. Let's see. This is pretty good so far. 40 minutes. Pretty regular stream of questions, which is nice. This was a Harper. Artist Kimber was a Harper. I don't think he's a Harper anymore. Artist Kimber being the character from Tomb of Annihilation. He has got the Ring of Winter artifact that they're looking for in the Storm King's Thunder. Unicorn Run. Should it come into gameplay or stay in lore only? You know, I don't know. That's a really good question. Could sort of go either way. I'm not familiar enough with its nuts and bolts to make a solid call on that. Let's see here. I'm just going to cheat here for a moment and refresh my memory by turning on the wrong browser, because that's how I roll apparently today. So let's see here. Unicorn Run. Seed of the Life. So Star Mountains. Okay. All right, having refreshed my memory, looking at it quick, is it supposed to be a Seed of Light? Yeah. There's actually already something like this in play in Termish. Except for it only affects elves. So, yeah, this is something that I would bring into gameplay. Man, good question. That stumped me there for a second. I was like, Unicorn Run, why is that familiar? Like, you could bring it in, but what is it all about? And then just, took a quick refresher look here, and yeah, I'd bring it in. The reason being that it's not going to break the game in any way, and it makes the area more interesting. There's already some, as I said, there's already something similar going on in Termish. There's one of the cities there. Can't remember its name, but it's there's something in the water there that causes elves to actually be fertile. So instead of one kid every 1,000 years or so, or whatever their horrible reproductive cycle is, pardon me, they're actually able to have kids. Wait, elves aren't fertile? Yeah, unless we're with humans, apparently not. Elves have, depending on who's writing them and what edition it is. Sorry, I'm going off topic here from the previous one. I'll come back to the See the Life thing. Depending on the edition and who's writing about them, elves are either a functional and viable species or not. The ones who describe them in a viable way, that happened in like 3.5 in the Races of the Wild book, and they describe elves as reaching physical and mental maturity around the age of 35. However, because they have such long lifespans, like up to 600 to 1,000 years, depending on the subspecies of elf, they have to, basically there's a bunch of cultural milestones that they'll undergo before they're considered to be full adults by the rest of elven society, and that's what ate up the additional 65 or so years of life for them. And in those instances, elves had a low reproductive rate, but at least had one that could sustain a population without every elf dying being a sudden and horrifying blow to the community. Other descriptions, though, have them as having extremely low fertility and low birth rates, and a century plus of growing up time. So basically it's like you're an infant at 0 and a late teen, early 20 something in your hundreds. And that's the non-viable sort of version, where they just basically, like, if an elf dies, the community's like, it's a massive blow to the community. And if they actually get into heaven forbid they actually get into a war, because like in a war against orcs, for example, unless the elves switch to like a genocidal war crime sort of footing, where they are literally trying to wipe out their opponents, they're going to lose, simply because they could beat the orcs back, and in the space of time they've maybe had a few kids, and those kids are now starting to just, you know, like, be kids. The orcs have already, you know, like, got their numbers back up and are right back ready to fight again. So yeah, but yeah, it comes to elves are not generally fertile in D&D worlds, unless they're in certain circumstances. For example, Unicorn Run would be one of them, and another one is this fountain of water or something like that going on in Termish that makes them have high levels of fertility relative to other elves. So yeah, but for Unicorn Run, yeah, I'd bring that in. I think it's a good idea. It helps break the masquerade that the Forgotten Realms is a heroic fantasy level world, because it is very much a high fantasy world to me, and this is something that helps do that. So I hope that's answered both questions about Unicorn Run and elven fertility, because that comes up. Yeah, like pretty much everything that's not a halfling or gnome in the conventional, like, player races. Maybe Dragonborn, I'm not sure how they reproduce in the new editions. So yeah, but everything else, like dwarves have a super low fertility rate, like so much so that there was an event called, what was it? The Thunder Blessing. That was it. The Thunder Blessing in Forgotten Realms. And all of a sudden the dwarf population got huge because their fertility rates went up, and more specifically, like with the gold dwarves, they had a lot of twins. And so they went from like being on the ropes as a species with a long-term survival prospect to being back in the game in a single generation, which was pretty epic. But elves have not had that happen yet, and yeah, having a rough go. It's really good questions tonight. I'm like, I should do this more often. You guys think I should do this more often? Let's answer random questions about Forgotten Realms. Oh, fair enough. I will write this down and see here. Do more AMAs. Yeah, I'll work it into a schedule or something like that. We do a couple of episodes of Lord Ivor and then do an AMA. Make it a regular sort of event. But I mean, we've got at least 10 minutes left, so I mean, there's must be more questions out there. I've got 5 awesome people watching right now, so. What do you want to know about the Forgotten Realms that I might remember? Or know? Or at least know where to look up? What makes Bregendarth interesting? I have no idea. Literally no idea. Truth be told, I haven't found very many of the like the Drow NPC characters to be super interesting. Kind of irritating a lot of the time, actually. And yeah, I have no idea why Brigandaerth is Aerth? I think that's how it's pronounced. I have no idea why he is a there's actually, I mean, like, there's Jaraxel and there's him. Yeah, I think it's just the fact that he's, I think it's the fact that he is a Drow elf and is easy to network into things happening in like the Sword Coast and the North generally. So I think what makes him interesting is he's just, especially in this era now where the Drow have sort of been replaced by Tieflings as being like the fun unusual race du jour. Yeah, I think it's just something interesting because there aren't a lot of Drow NPCs out there, and there's even fewer that have any sort of significant background or development. So he's got that. He's got that eye patch going on. Oh wait, no, that was Jaraxel has the eye patch. He should probably have an eye patch though. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. So I don't find him super interesting. I think I had a character once who fought him and the rest of those that group, and it was pretty crazy. Who's an underrated NPC I'd like more people to use or encounter? Like literally every single character from the Harper's series of novels. Like all of those main characters. They were interesting, they were dynamic, and they were doing things, and they were interesting. So like you had like Erlen Moonblade is the one that is my go-to one. But yeah, there's them. I'd also like to see more Sorials. And I mean, we got a taste of them a little bit in Tomb of Annihilation when with Dragonbait being back, and it was torture because they were so cool. Like they're dinosaur people, and they had a lot of really cool stuff going on. Who else? Yeah, I think the problem is that like for NPCs, I want more people to use or encounter, is so many of them would be dead right now, or their status is unknown because you had that time leap from between 3rd edition where most of them were still alive, through 4th and into 5th. So like over 100 years has passed, so a lot of them are dead. But an unspecified number of them were just sort of, yeah, his comment here, just stick them in a magical weapon for a bit. Yeah, exactly. A lot of them were sort of like brought back as part of the Sundering event to sort of as that part of that soft reset. So I think I'd really have to go through the books and see what NPCs are floating around and how they could be used. I do wish that Artist Kimber and Dragonbait had been more thoughtfully used in Tomb of Annihilation, though. I think it's obvious at this point it's the particular campaign setting or campaign season I have the most familiarity with, just because of the insane amount of research I had to do about it for those reviews I did. But they were tied into the Storm King's Thunder because Artus Kimber has the Ring of Winter, which is an artifact capable of causing an ice age. So he's got that on his finger. And that's what they're looking for. Like, there's a bunch of giants off the coast of Chult. And I really wish that they had been used better in the, like, they were presented. And it was sort of a Chekhov's gun situation, you know. If you're going to have a gun on the wall in the first act, it has to be used by the third act. And it was just sort of like, hey guys, here's Artus Kimber, here's Dragonbait. That's right, 2 beloved characters from 2nd edition are back. And then nothing. There's no follow-up. So, yeah. I would like people to have more encounters with them and more encounters with the giants from the Storm King's Thunder and the giant, and more tie into that, because that book had a lot of stuff going on at the end of it, and it was stuff that affects the world and the relations between humans and giants on a lot of levels, especially as the good ending is sort of assumed to the good, and the good on the okay good ending are assumed to be the outcomes. Like, these are things that change a lot, and I'd like to see more of that. And things like I'd like to see the Furbolgs get their Giantkin status back, because I thought that was really cool, because they're Giantkin on the Forgotten Realms. That was a bit of a ramble. It was good though. Yeah, no, I do love to ramble. It is a skill of mine. The ability to go down rabbit holes of my own invention is yep. Seriously though, like, Furbolgs as presented, is not even a question. This is just me rambling now. So yeah, Furbolgs as presented in Vol's Guide to Monsters, just like a fraction of what's going on with them. They were in fact originally Giantkin, a Giantkin race with a Fey background at the same time. The reason being that in the Forgotten Realms context, which is, you know, what Vol's Guide to Monsters presents them for, they were the result of Annam, the giant's like overgod. His wife cheated on him a lot, like a distressing number of times, and as a result, ogres, and a whole bunch of Entons and a whole bunch of other races all came into being because of this. And her cheating on him with, I can't remember who it was, but it was like a greater Fey creature, resulted in the Furbolgs. So they had both like Giantkin and Fey background, and that was pretty awesome. Yeah, absolutely, yes. So the question here, weren't the Vodkin was tied to that too? Yes, they were. The Vodkin, Entons, ogres, a couple of others were all tied into that whole thing. And I'm actually mulling over doing giving the Storm King's Thunder campaign the same treatment that I gave the Tomb of Annihilation, just because having had to have referenced it a few times and like reading through it a few times, I was really astounded of all the things that happened in it that did not translate forwards into the new into the new Forgotten Realms books, because there's a lot of awesome stuff going on, and in a world where time is a thing, you're going to have to acknowledge these changes eventually. They can't just be left hanging forever. So, yeah. Yeah. All right, so it's been an hour, so last set of questions, and then we'll call it an evening because I think everyone probably needs to go to sleep, depending on where you are. So, I'm really curious to see what the last questions are going to be. Silence so far. I'm out of ideas for tonight. Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I think, yeah, brain is already shut down. Yeah, that'll happen. It is late. So, that's a little bit of. I had lots of questions last weekend. I did not remember. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, this has been fun. This has definitely been a fun evening. I wasn't sure how this was going to go. I'm glad it went as well as it did. And so I'm just looking at the map right now, and just trying to think of some little fun fact to leave behind for everybody here at the end of the night. Oh, actually, yeah. Here is a good final thought for the evening. So, yeah. Neat fact, weird fact. Nimbrel is it's southwest of Chult, and it's islands full of magic users and half elves, because there's an elf population there, some humans, and they mixed, and now there's just a bunch of half elves and humans. But it's super powerful, super magic-y, and they have Pegasus cavalry, which is pretty epic in of itself. And they're also super isolationist for some reason. Like, it was Netherese refugees, the same sorts that founded Halrua, landed there and set up a kingdom. The weird thing, though, is that they also sort of rule Samrach, which is up by Chult itself. And what's weird about it is that, like, for all their purported magical powers and everything else like that, the guy they sent up there to fight and do things, or who volunteered, was only really good at illusions. And so ended up setting up this society where everybody is, like, deathly paranoid about snake people infiltrating into the place, because they have no way to detect them. And apparently haven't heard of clerics or something like that for some reason. So there's a whole lot of weird stuff going on with that relationship. And the Nimberlese have formed, like, this weird ruling class over the Thinguth and Tashalar locals that are there. So, yeah, just a weird thing to think about. If you want to send your players to a place where the people are paranoid and hunting for snake people all the time, Samrach is the place to send them. And if you want to have them battle Pegasus cavalry, then send them down to Nimbrel to say hello, because apparently they are paranoid as heck down there. So this has been a fun evening. Lots of great questions. Lots of great questions. That's the big thing. It's been fantastic. So next episode of Lore Diver is going to be an actual, real, normal episode of Lore Diver. And, you know, who likes bird people? You know, trick question. Everybody likes bird people. And so the next episode of Lore Diver is all about the Aarakocra, or Aarakocra. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Hopefully I will have figured it out by then. So thank you everybody for listening, and thank you very much for your questions. This has been Lore Diver, the POCGamer podcast. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe. There's links to my blog below if you want to read more. And of course, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as POCGamer. If you want to support this podcast, there's links to Coffee and my new Patreon below. And pretty much everywhere throughout my social media. Music was provided by purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and have a great day. Or, well, evening in this case.